Chapter 61. I'm sorry, she's not a pushover. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 61. I'm sorry, she's not a pushover. Translator. Henyi Translations Editor. Henyi Translations. Since Pei Qian wanted to protect the soldier, he naturally arranged everything perfectly. The three brothers, who had driven the ox cart over to seek help, were familiar with Lu Zhe. They quickly integrated into the refugee camp. Initially, Lin Suisui was worried that Pei Qian was just pretending. However, when she saw the pile of high-grade herbs that had been arranged with the ox cart, Lin Suisui finally relaxed. On the other hand, Lu Zhe had a few more acquaintances. This didn't affect the others much, but to those who wanted to keep an eye on them, this was another good thing. After all, from their perspective, since Gu Erlang was so capable, his brothers probably were not ordinary people either. Even if they couldn't get close to Gu Erlang for the time being, they still had a chance with these brothers, right? My husband's acquaintances are naturally hunters as well. Lin Suisui sat on the needlework in her hand and explained softly to a certain woman who had come for the umpteenth time today, they're definitely capable. As for whether they have families, I don't know either. After all, we're all people who have experienced a disaster. We're already grateful for surviving until now. As for our family matters, how can we poke at others' sore spots? Lin Suisui was already very skilled at dealing with these questions. Seeing that the cotton robe in her hand was about to be completed, she thought about how she had to let Lu Zhe try it again tonight. If the size wasn't right, she had to change it again. After putting away the needle, Lin Suisui was about to stand up and walk back when a hand suddenly reached out and grabbed the clothes in her sewing basket. This rude action made Lin Suisui frown. Without thinking, she pulled out the long needle that had just been tied to her sleeve and stabbed the hand. Ah! It hurts. The owner of the hand clearly didn't expect Lin Suisui to be so ruthless as to directly use a needle to pierce the back of her hand. She screamed and hurriedly retracted her hand as she glared at Lin Suisui angrily and accused loudly, "Hey, how dare you stab me with a needle? You tried to take it without asking. You're either trying to snatch it or steal it. Since you've already reached out to take my things, why can't I stab you with a needle?" When Lin Suisui put away her clothes, she finally turned around and saw who had reached out to take her clothes. She wasn't a stranger. She was actually Su Sanyang, who had a good relationship with Du Miao'er. Compared to Du Miao'er, who had grown up amidst hardship since she was young, Su Sanyang had grown up with a silver spoon in her mouth. Although her family wasn't that wealthy, because she was the only daughter, she had been doted on since she was young. Naturally, this resulted in her current spoiled and domineering personality. When Lin Suisui first saw her, she had already sensed her malice and dissatisfaction towards her. However, she didn't take it to heart because she wasn't familiar with her. But now, the other party took the initiative to provoke her. She wasn't a pushover. I just wanted to take a look at it, but you're actually so fierce. You're so unreasonable. I really don't know what Gu Erlang sees in you. Su Sanyang rubbed the back of her hand and glared at Lin Suisui. What does that have to do with you? If you're curious or dissatisfied, you can ask my husband to his face. Why did you come here to snatch my things? Lin Suisui protected the sewing basket in her hand. She didn't intend to continue arguing with Su Sanyang. Chicken soup was still being brewed. However, Su Sanyang was unwilling to let her leave. She had just turned around and taken 2 steps when Su Sanyang ran over and spread out her arms to block her. Don't leave. You just stabbed me with a needle. Do you think I'll just let it go? Lin Suisui sized up the flustered Su Sanyang in front of her and guessed without thinking that from when she reached for her clothes, she had been deliberately looking for trouble to delay her and prevent her from returning to her ox cart. But what was she doing this for? With this in mind, Lin Suisui was no longer in a hurry. She calmly retracted her gaze from her ox cart and looked at Su Sanyang, who was blocking her. Then what do you want? Su Sanyang originally thought that Lin Suisui would argue with her, but she didn't expect her to be so cooperative. For a moment, she couldn't think of what to say. She froze for a long time before she regained her senses and stammered, "You have to compensate me." Compensation. Lin Suisui tilted her head and looked at Su Sanyang with a faint smile. "How much do you want me to pay you?" "I don't care. Anyway, it's a fact that you injured me. You have to compensate me." Su Sanyang bit her lip and began to wonder if there was enough time. "All right." Lin Suisui nodded. She lowered her head and took a copper coin from her waist. Then, she raised her hand and threw it at Su Sanyang's feet. "This is for you. Take it and don't throw it away." After saying that, she ignored Su Sanyang, who was still stunned. She quickly walked around her and towards the ox cart. Thinking of Du Miao's previous instructions, Su Sanyang didn't care if the copper coin on the ground was an insult to her. She turned around and chased after Lin Suisui. "Stop. You're not allowed to leave or go back." "Hey, what are you doing?" Mrs. Luo could tell that something was wrong. She quickly chased after Su Sanyang and reached out to stop her from causing trouble. Although the surrounding people didn't know what was going on, from the commotion, their intuition told them that there was some interesting drama to watch. Therefore, a group of people gathered and followed Lin Suisui towards her ox cart. On the way over, Lin Suisui was actually thinking about why Su Sanyang had stopped her from coming back. After thinking about it, she felt that the most likely possibility was that she had an accomplice who wanted to steal something from her ox cart. She wasn't worried. Their money was usually safe kept by Lu Zhe. Only some herbs and cloth were left in the ox cart. Oh, right, there was also Little White. Thinking of Little White, who was still sleeping in the ox cart, Lin Suisui subconsciously quickened her pace. However, before she could approach, she saw the tarpaulin curtain beside the ox cart move. Without warning, a figure flew out with a scream. Chapter 62. Shut up. If you keep shouting, you are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 62. Shut up. If you keep shouting, I'll sew your mouth shut. Translator. Henyi Translations Editor. Henyi Translations. The person who was thrown not far from Lin Suisui's feet was actually a familiar face. "Why is it you?" Lin Suisui didn't say anything, but Su Sanyang, who was chasing after her, was dumbfounded. Didn't Du Wan'er say that the person who wanted to see Gu Erlang alone and ask him for help was Du Miao? Why was it Du Ling'er who was thrown out now? Lin Suisui was also caught off guard. She froze for a long time before she regained her senses. Just as she was about to take a step forward to see Du Ling'er's condition, she saw Pei Qian walk out from behind the curtain. How lively! When he moved, his fluttering clothes brushed against the fallen leaves and withered grass on the ground, making Lin Suisui's heart rise to her throat. She didn't know why Pei Qian was here at this time. What worried her even more was that if Pei Qian was here, what about Lu Zhe? Lu Zhe wouldn't. "I have something to ask Gu Erlang." Just as I sat down, someone took off her clothes and tried to pounce on me. How bold. You don't even check to see who it is. Pei Qian definitely wouldn't be merciful. Lin Suisui looked at Du Ling'er, who was panting on the ground. She instinctively wanted to squat down and check her condition, but Pei Qian stopped her. "Madam Lu, do you know what the woman on the ground is after? Aren't you afraid of dirtying your hands by saving her?" Lin Suisui's hand was in midair. Pei Qian's words only made her silent for a moment. Then, she flicked away his hand and squatted down to take Du Ling'er's pulse. Just as she had expected, Pei Qian probably kicked Du Ling'er in the chest and sent her flying. Therefore, at this moment, her heart meridian was severely injured. If she didn't get help, she would probably die. Mr. Pei, human lives are not worthless. Even if she did something wrong and offended you, she doesn't deserve to die for it. Lin Suisui stood up and turned to bow to Pei Qian. Although her voice was still gentle, it was filled with absolute determination. Mr. Pei, please be magnanimous and allow me to treat her. You really want to save her. Pei Qian looked at Lin Suisui, who had directly refuted his decision in front of everyone. Although he wasn't angry, the smile on his face had clearly disappeared. The refugees who had chased after them were already kneeling on the ground under Pei Qian's intimidation. Even Du Wangshe, who had panicked and rushed over to save her daughter, became afraid when she saw Pei Qian. She knelt at the side like everyone else. Only Lin Suisui still didn't give up on her persistence. Please show mercy. Lin Suisui lowered her eyes and bowed to Pei Qian. As the saying goes, every injustice has its perpetrator. No matter how wrong she is, she shouldn't be used as a scapegoat, and you shouldn't be used by others either. Everything that had happened today seemed very clear. The cause and effect of the matter were also obvious at a glance. Du Ling'er had coveted Lu Zhe, so she found someone to cooperate with her. She wanted to let everyone see them making out. This way, even if Lu Zhe didn't agree, he probably wouldn't be able to refuse. However, Du Ling'er didn't expect that the person waiting behind the carriage wasn't Lu Zhe, but Pei Qian. Therefore, the situation went out of control. If not for Su Sanyang's scream, Lin Suisui might have had such an opinion as well. Unfortunately, Su Sanyang's attitude made it clear that the person working with her wasn't Du Ling'er. She was also shocked by Du Ling'er's appearance. Then, who was working with Su Sanyang? What was the mastermind's plan? After Lin Suisui realized that something was wrong, the first thing she did was naturally to save Du Ling'er's life. Only when she woke up would the truth be revealed. I don't like smart people. Fortunately, you're really smart. Pei Qian stared at Lin Suisui for a long time. Just as everyone felt like they were about to suffocate from the tension, he suddenly laughed. But I'm also curious. If I don't intend to give in to you today, what will you do? Mr. Pei, you're the son of a marquis. Why do you have to force me into a corner? Before Lin Suisui could reply, a hand reached out from the side and pulled her behind him. Lu Zhe stood in front of Lin Suisui and said word by word, she's just a doctor from the countryside. She hasn't seen much and only thinks about saving lives. Even if the person on the ground offended Mr. Pei previously, just as my wife said, even though she's in the wrong, she doesn't deserve to die for it. Gu Erlang, who are you trying to help? Pei Qian's gaze swept across the pale Du Ling'er and finally returned to Lu Zhe's face. His words were very provocative. I already have a wife. Please don't say such things again. Lu Zhe was already used to Pei Qian's inexplicable provocation, so he dealt with his provocation with ease. Alright, I still have something else to do. Since you're all helping her, I'll let it slide. Pei Qian flexed his wrist as she chuckled. He didn't comment on Lu Zhe's words, but he relented. He turned around and left without looking back. After Pei Qian left, Lin Suisui ran out from behind Lu Zhe and quickly squatted beside Du Ling'er to treat her. Despite her skillful techniques, she wasn't very confident. After all, Pei Qian's interruption had wasted some time. Lin Suisui wasn't sure if she could save Du Ling'er's life now, so she could only do her best. Ling'er, my Ling'er. You vicious couple, if not for you guys, how could Ling'er have suffered so much? If anything happens to Ling'er, I'll make you two pay with your lives. Du Wangshe pounced over. Fortunately, Mrs. Luo and the others reacted quickly and stopped her. However, they couldn't stop Du Wangshe from crying and making a fuss. The commotion annoyed Lin Suisui. She suddenly turned around with a dark expression and scolded Du Wangshe vehemently, shut up. If you continue to shout, I'll sew your mouth shut. Chapter 63. Roasted fish. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 63. Roasted Fish Translator. Henyi Translations Editor. Henyi Translations. Du Wangshi had always been a person who bullied the weak and feared the strong. Although she didn't know what had happened previously, from Pei Qian's actions, she could guess what had happened. Because she was familiar with her daughter's personality, Du Wangshi didn't suspect that there was something else involved in today's matter. Her first reaction was to find a scapegoat. She didn't have the guts to look for Pei Qian. After all, she was afraid that she would be killed. Therefore, the next best target was the meek and easy bully couple in front of her. In addition, her family had originally planned to marry her daughter to Gu Erlang. Now that this opportunity was presented to her, she naturally had to grab it tightly. After all, it was obvious that Wanner had ill intentions towards her husband, but Madame Lu still wanted to save her daughter. Wasn't it obvious that she was a fool? However, Du Wangshi didn't expect that this pushover, who she looked like she could crush easily, would suddenly change her attitude and shout at her so fiercely. "Are you curious about why I want to save your daughter?" While Du Wangshi was in a daze, Lin Suisui had already put away her needles and stood up. Lin Suisui turned to look at Du Wangshi as she said, "Because I don't want to be scapegoated and wrongly accused. Therefore, she has to live and tell you what happened today." Lin Suisui paused for a moment before looking at Du Wangshi and continuing, "Your daughter is fine for the time being, but she's injured after all. She has to recuperate when she goes back. Try not to let her get too tired during this period of time. When we reach the base, it's best if you hire a doctor to examine her." She didn't want to have any more deep contact with the family in front of her, so she gave instructions at this moment. Du Wangshi's mind was already a mess. "What do you mean?" Du Wangshi swallowed hard and glared at Lin Suisui. "You're saying that my daughter, you should ask your daughter yourself when she wakes up." Lin Suisui didn't intend to say anything else. She didn't want to get involved with them. Du Wangshi wanted to continue pestering her, but Lu Zhe turned around and glanced at her, making her mind go blank from fear. When she came back to her senses, the back of her shirt was already soaked in cold sweat. When the cold wind blew, she couldn't help but shiver. That gaze just now was so terrifying. Even though Du Wangshi had reminded herself more than once that Gu Erlang was just an ordinary hunter, the killing intent in his eyes still made her apprehensive. Since she couldn't find trouble with this couple for the time being, she might as well go back and figure out what had happened to Linger. "Where did you go just now?" When they returned to their ox cart, Lin Suisui pulled Lu Zhe over and asked him about the situation just now. She remembered that when she went to Aunt Luo's place to do needlework, Lu Zhe was still by the bonfire. "Wu Lu just came to look for me and said that he had something to ask me for help with, so I went over to take a look. When I came back, I saw that something had happened." Lu Zhe felt that what had happened today was indeed too much of a coincidence. Compared to him, Pei Qian naturally had the advantage in terms of obtaining information. Therefore, Pei Qian probably expected everything that had happened today. That was why he took advantage of the situation. However, there was another question. What did Pei Qian want to achieve by doing this? Just to have fun. "Today, Su Sanyang deliberately found fault with me. At first, I didn't think that anything was wrong, but later on, when I realized that she had been stalling for time to prevent me from leaving, I realized that something was wrong. She had always been very close to the Du sisters. I originally thought that she was buying time for Du Miaoer and the others. After discovering that it was Du Linger who was thrown out by Pei Qian, Su Sanyang was shocked. Therefore, Lin Suisui tried her best to tell Lu Zhe everything that had just happened in detail. Then, she frowned and said in a low voice, "Why did Du Linger become the one who suffered in the end? No matter why it became Du Linger, this has nothing to do with us now." Lu Zhe reached out and rubbed the top of Lin Suisui's head with a smile to reassure her. Lin Suisui covered the top of her head and looked at Lu Zhe, who had turned around to leave to deal with the food by the bonfire. She felt that he seemed to like to rub the top of her head and pinch her cheek recently. The sense of distance she felt when they first met seemed to be fading. Although she didn't dislike this type of interaction. Come over quickly. We're going to eat grilled fish tonight. Lu Zhe saw that Lin Suisui was still sitting on the shaft and rubbing her head with a confused expression. His heart softened, and his tone became gentler. He was afraid that she would be frightened, so he said in a coaxing tone, "Wu Lu looked for me just now because he realized that there were fish in the stream over there. He told me to try my luck. This fish isn't small." Seeing that there was finally a new ingredient tonight, Lin Suisui couldn't care less about the previous incident. Her attention was immediately attracted by the big green fish Lu Zhe had shown her. "No, we can't roast it directly. The fishiness can't be removed like this, and it won't be easy to roast it." Seeing that Lu Zhe was about to put the big green fish on the grill, she quickly jumped down from the shaft and stopped him. "Let's marinate it with salt and ginger for a while. It's still early. Let's go nearby to see if there are any wild vegetables that can get rid of the fishiness." Getting to eat grilled fish was a rare opportunity. Lin Suisui didn't want to make do. Wouldn't that be a waste? Lu Zhe didn't refuse. He began to prepare the fish according to Lin Suisui's instructions. He first marinated the fish before setting off with Lin Suisui, who was already prepared. They went to the pasture at the side to find the wild vegetables Lin Suisui needed. Lin Suisui felt that they were quite lucky. Although the temperature near the north had begun to drop, they could still find some wild vegetables with strong vitality in the wilderness. For example, the perilla that Lin Suisui needed now. With skillful movements, she plucked the purple perilla leaves that were close to the stream. After she washed them by the stream and prepared to turn around, she keenly smelled blood in the air. Chapter 64. Murder. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 64. Murder. Translator. Henyi Translations Editor. Henyi Translations. Lin Suisui stopped in her tracks. Lu Zhe did the same. She and Lu Zhe were both sensitive to the smell of blood. If she could smell it, Lu Zhe naturally wouldn't miss it. However, weren't they a little too lucky? Although she was a little confused, she didn't stop walking. She and Lu Zhe began to search the grassland. "Come here," the two of them split up to search. Not long after, Lu Zhe found something. Lin Suisui rushed over and saw a piece of freshly dug soil. Although there was some concealment, because it was too sloppy, she could still tell that this pasture had been dug. Most importantly, the grass nearby was stained with blood that hadn't completely dried. Lu Zhe found a withered branch. He dug up the soil that had yet to flatten. The thick smell of blood below instantly assaulted their noses, as if a seal had been lifted. Lin Suisui subconsciously raised her hand to cover her mouth and nose, but her eyes didn't move away from Lu Zhe's branch. "Stay away." Lu Zhe stopped what he was doing and looked up to instruct Lin Suisui in a low voice. It was obvious that the person buried below wasn't a living person. Moreover, the smell of blood was so strong, so the scene would probably be gory, and he didn't want Lin Suisui to be frightened. Lin Suisui didn't force herself. She agreed obediently and took a few steps back before turning around. She stopped staring at that place. After settling Lin Suisui down, Lu Zhe continued to speed up. Before long, he removed a new layer of soil and a naked female corpse was revealed. And the reason they could smell blood almost 100 steps away from where they were standing was that the scene in front of him was too terrifying and gory. Not only had the woman's clothes been stripped, but even her skin was missing. The reason he could tell that this was a female corpse was mainly that her limbs looked slender and feminine, unlike a man's. After seeing this scene, Lu Zhe was to be glad that Lin Suisui had turned around. Otherwise, a little girl like her would probably have nightmares. "Let's go." Lu Zhe filled in the soil again. Then, he stood up and walked to Lin Suesue's side. He said to her, "I've already dealt with it." "Who is it?" Lin Suesue followed beside Lu Zhe and asked him in a low voice, "Who's buried there?" "I don't know." Lu Zhe shook his head. "From the figure, it's probably a woman, but I don't know who it is." Lin Suesue didn't think too much about it. Hearing Lu Zhe's words, she subconsciously asked, "Have you seen that person before?" After all, there were many people in the refugee camp, so it was normal that he hadn't seen the person before. "No, it's because this woman was skinned." Lu Zhe stopped in his tracks and seemed to hesitate for a moment before saying to Lin Suesue, "I can only tell from her figure that she's a woman." She was probably a young woman. Although Lu Zhe said it very simply and had tried his best to weaken the blow, Lin Suesue still felt a chill run down her spine and her face turned pale. "Don't be afraid." Lu Zhe naturally saw Lin Suesue's nervousness. He quickly reached out to support Lin Suesue, who was still a little flustered. In the north, there are barbarians that worship shamans. In their clan, shamans can control life and death. They are very powerful and influential. The reason I knew about this barbarian clan was that in my memory, in order to seek a cure for a seriously burned woman, I learned that in the northern region, shamans would teach their subordinates a secret technique. They would take the skin of living people and use them as a disguise. This way, it would be more convenient to carry out missions like assassination and spying without anyone knowing. Because this technique was kept a secret, only the wolf guards under every shaman priest were qualified to learn it. Although I wanted to study it, I had never found a way to study it. In the end, I could only give up. From what you said today, I suspect that someone used this woman's identity to infiltrate the refugee camp. With her previous interactions with Lu Zhe, Lin Suesue couldn't be bothered to hide anything anymore. She simply told Lu Zhe her guess. How strange. This is just an ordinary refugee camp. Why are there suddenly so many incidents? Why are the northern barbarians appearing here wave after wave? As Lin Suesue spoke, she seemed to have thought of something and continued to mutter to Lu Zhe, "Previously, they wanted to sell us refugees to be slaves outside the border. Now, even the wolf guards beside the shaman have come out. What treasure does our refugee camp have that's worth them putting in so much effort? Perhaps Pei Qian knows about this, but he might not tell us directly." Seeing that Lin Suesue had stopped, Lu Zhe thought that she must have been frightened by the news just now. Without saying anything, he bent down and picked her up. You, put me down. Put me down." In a panic, Lin Suesue reached out and wrapped her arms around Lu Zhe's neck. She spoke in a fierce manner, but her voice became softer and softer. "At the speed you're walking now, we won't be able to eat the fish when we get back." Lu Zhe didn't care about Lin Suesue's struggle at all. He even shook Lin Suesue, who was in his arms, making her subconsciously hug his neck even tighter. "Tsk, don't worry, I won't drop you. Despite how much meat you've eaten these past few days, why haven't you gained any weight?" Seeing that Lin Suesue was no longer struggling pointlessly, Lu Zhe naturally took larger steps. His teasing made Lin Suesue feel embarrassed and angry. She secretly spat at him and simply turned around angrily to ignore him. "We'll only tell Pei Qian that we found the corpse. As for the shaman's wolf guard, don't let anyone else find out about it." Lu Zhe knew when to stop. Seeing that Lin Suesue was really getting angry, he didn't harp on this joke. Instead, he told Lin Suesue about the serious matter at hand. "I know. We just need to give a small piece of information to Pei Qian. If we say too much, Pei Qian will definitely suspect us even more." Lin Suesue nodded and agreed with Lu Zhe's suggestion. Chapter 65. I'm hungry. I'm not in the mood to. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 65. I'm hungry. I'm not in the mood to go. Translator. Henyi Translations Editor. Henyi translations. Lin Suisui also understood very well that she and Lu Zhe were refugees who had to leave their hometowns to settle down in the north. She could know medicine, and Lu Zhe could also be an outstanding hunter. But how could they know so much about the secrets of those tribes outside the border? If they really revealed everything, it would be equivalent to incriminating themselves. Is there a way to find that devil in human disguise as soon as possible? Lu Zhe and Lin Suisui weren't people that procrastinated. He had never kept things from Lin Suisui just because she was a woman. Lu Zhe even discussed many things with Lin Suisui along the way. Therefore, he naturally discussed the solution with Lin Suisui. In order to successfully disguise themselves, most of those wolf guards have practiced the bone-shrinking art since they were young. It's difficult to find anything fishy about their appearance. However, the disguise obtained through this cruel method also has fatal weaknesses. That is, the human skin is borrowed after all. Without vitality, even in such cold weather, there's no way to maintain it for a long time. Of course, if there's a need, the shaman has a secret medicine to extend the human skin's longevity. It's said that the most successful example was the case where the lover of a shaman had another lover and had an affair with someone else behind that priest's back. In a fit of anger, the shaman executed his lover and let a wolf guard pretend to be her. Relying on the secret medicine, the human skin didn't rot for decades. However, under these conditions, I believe the wolf guards will not waste that precious secret medicine. Lin Suisui didn't hide anything from Lu Zhe and told him everything she knew. Actually, I feel that this matter has something to do with the Du family. Do you suspect that the female corpse just now might be one of the Du sisters? Lu Zhe immediately understood Lin Suisui's guess. However, this was only a guess. He still needed evidence. Why don't we test them? Lin Suisui blinked and suddenly had an idea. How? Lu Zhe frowned. From the sly smile on Lin Suisui's face, he had a bad feeling. His intuition told him that it was best if he didn't know about this suggestion. Look, Du Miaoer has never given up on you. If the sisters hadn't been replaced, if you request to see them with Du Linger's incident as an excuse, they definitely won't ignore you. The more Lin Suisui thought about it, the more she felt that her suggestion was good. With this method, they could figure out the situation of the Du sisters without any effort. He whispered to the little girl in his arms, since you know that the two of them have ulterior motives towards me, why did you still come up with such a bad idea? Lu Zhe took a deep breath and suppressed the urge to throw Lin Suisui to the ground. He only hoped that she could understand what he meant and leave herself a way out. What do you mean? I think that this method is the easiest. Moreover, I know your ability. You definitely won't fall for their tricks. Lin Suisui didn't feel the danger at all. The smile on her face was still very bright. Aren't the two sisters of the Du family the most suspicious now? Coincidentally, Du Linger has just been injured. I'll pack some brown sugar later and you can make a trip under the pretext of visiting her. So you've even found an excuse for me. Lu Zhe was so angry that he laughed. Are you really not afraid that I won't be able to come back after this trip? Although he also felt that Lin Suisui's suggestion was indeed a very good idea in the current situation. For some reason, he felt a little suffocated. Then forget it. Lu Zhe's anger made the smile on Lin Suisui's face fade. She thought about it carefully and chose to give up in the end. That's true. This arrangement is indeed a little dangerous. I heard that the wolf guards beside the shaman are all top experts. If anything happens to you this time, I'll really regret it. The Du family's matter is not urgent. I think that after today's commotion, even if we don't take the initiative to look for them, they will come looking for us in the next 2 days. We should wait. Wait for what? With me around, do I need you to wait? Lu Zhe was enraged. Was he really angry about this? Seeing that they had already reached his ox cart, Lu Zhe put Lin Suisui down carefully with a straight face. He glanced at Lin Suisui, who was looking at him in confusion. Lu Zhe snorted softly, then turned around and walked out. Hey, where are you going? Lin Suisui blinked. When she reacted, Lu Zhe was already walking forward without looking back. She chased after Lu Zhe and asked Lu Zhe, who was already 4 to 5 steps away, in confusion, aren't you going to roast the fish? Where can I go? I'm going to find the answer to your questions. Lu Zhe stopped and replied in a low voice before continuing to walk forward in a hurry. The direction he was heading in was where the Du family was resting. Hey, wait for me. Seeing that Lu Zhe really planned to go over and find out, Lin Suisui was a little anxious. She quickly jogged over to keep up with Lu Zhe. At this moment, she could tell that Lu Zhe seemed to be angry. She reached out to grab Lu Zhe's sleeve as she quickly apologized, I'm sorry. I shouldn't have let you take the risk. Don't worry, I definitely won't come up with such a bad idea again. Don't be angry, okay? Is that what I'm angry about? Lu Zhe stopped and turned to look at the little girl, who was looking up at him in confusion. Her bright eyes were filled with deep guilt, uneasiness, and confusion. She really didn't understand and asked him very earnestly, then, what are you angry about? Tell me, I'll definitely change. Forget it, let's go back and roast fish. After a long silence, Lu Zhe looked up, then turned around and pulled Lin Suisui back. You're not going anymore. Seeing that Lu Zhe had finally changed his mind, Lin Suisui was happy, but she still felt that Lu Zhe was acting a little strange. I'm hungry. I'm not in the mood anymore. Lu Zhe glanced at Lin Suisui meaningfully and his tone was filled with desperation. Let's go back and fill our stomachs first. Chapter 66. Help you are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 66. Help Translator. Henyi Translations Editor. Henyi Translations. Originally, Lu Zhe planned to go to the Du family the next morning to see how things were going. However, before he could do so, the Du family sent the latest news: Du Linger was awake. However, she had gone crazy. Du Linger started screaming when she woke up and said she saw the devil. Mrs. Luo whispered the first-hand news to Lin Suisui. Actually, this wasn't a secret. Du Linger had been causing trouble for most of the night since midnight yesterday. Now, most of the people in the refugee camp knew that the Du family's young lady wanted to seduce Gu Erlang, who was married. In the end, she got the wrong person and pounced on Pei Qian. So many people were there last night, so the news has already spread. In short, everyone is talking about it now. Mrs. Luo sighed. Thinking of the group of gossipy people who had just been sent away, she felt annoyed. Actually, this matter had nothing to do with Lin Suisui and the others, but Pei Qian was involved. No one in the refugee camp dared to say anything bad about Pei Qian, so they targeted Lin Suisui and the others. It's fine. They can say anything they want. Words will never hurt me. Lin Suisui wasn't interested in those unpleasant rumors. She was still concerned about Du Linger's current situation. If Du Linger was really crazy now, it wouldn't be good news for her. Initially, she wanted to learn more about the situation from her, but it seemed that she couldn't anymore. Just as Lin Suisui was wondering if she should find an excuse to go to the Du family to ask about it, Du Wangshi gave her this opportunity. Du Wangshi came to her in tears. Madam Lu, you're benevolent. Please, please save Linger. I'll kowtow to you and apologize for not recognizing your talent previously. Please be magnanimous and treat what I said previously as a vicious dog barking nonsense. As long as you're willing to save Linger, I'll do anything you ask. Please, if you ignore her, she really won't be able to survive. As Du Wangshi spoke, she was about to kneel down to Lin Suisui. If not for Mrs. Luo's quick reflexes, Du Wangshi might have knelt down and kowtowed to Lin Suisui. Lin Suisui watched as Du Wangshi cried her heart out. Although she knew about Du Wangshi's dirty deeds, she couldn't help but marvel at this moment. Indeed, even a vicious tiger wouldn't hurt its own cubs. Don't be like this. I can't accept such a big gesture from you. Lin Suisui quickly took 2 steps to the side before looking at Du Wangshi with a smile. She said gently, "Don't be anxious. If you want to save your daughter, you have to tell me the whole story first. Otherwise, even if I want to help, I can't, right?" As Lin Suisui spoke, Mrs. Luo had already helped Du Wangshi sit down by the bonfire. Upon hearing Lin Suisui's words, although Du Wangshi hadn't completely calmed down, she was no longer as agitated as before. She pinched her handkerchief and lowered her head to think for a long time before saying in a low voice, "After I went back yesterday, I pulled my 2 stepdaughters over to ask what happened. At this point, I won't hide anything. My stepdaughter, Du Miaoer, does have the intention to marry Gu Erlang. Actually, it's because I plan to marry her off. However, Du Miaoer didn't like the man I found for her. Originally, I just planned to watch without doing anything. After all, regardless of success or failure, I have nothing to lose." However, from the beginning to the end, Ling'er has never participated in this matter. She had always been at odds with her 2 sisters, so they rarely spend time together. Things were strange yesterday. Du Miaoer actually took the initiative to call Ling'er out to dig wild vegetables. At that time, I still had a few stitches left, so I didn't ask about it. Ling'er had never suffered at the hands of her sisters. I didn't know what happened later, but I heard that something had happened to Ling'er. When I came over, I thought that Ling'er just did so out of impulse, but after hearing your words, I realized that something was wrong. When I returned, I asked Du Miaoer and her sister what was going on. However, things were strange. The sisters, who were usually respectful to me, seemed to have changed. They ignored my question. At that time, because Ling'er was still unconscious, I didn't ask further. However, from the sisters' attitude, I wondered if they had said something to provoke Ling'er into doing such a foolish thing. Originally, I wanted to wait for Ling'er to wake up before asking her about the circumstances. However, when she woke up, she seemed to have gone crazy. She shouted and cried, and she even fought with people who approached her. They all said that Ling'er had gone crazy. I have no other choice. Madame Lu, they all say that you're the reincarnation of a divine doctor. If you can end such a terrifying plague, you definitely can save Ling'er. Madame Lu, please be merciful and save my Ling'er." As Du Wangshi spoke, tears flowed down her face again. She really had no choice other now. There were no other doctors in the refugee camp now, and those accompanying medical officials would only listen to Mr. Pei's orders. Ling'er had been injured by Mr. Pei, so how could those medical officials come over to treat Ling'er? Therefore, the only person she could ask for help now was Madame Lu, who the Du family had offended. "You just said that Du Miaoer and her sister were acting unusual last night." Lin Suisui immediately caught the main point. She paused for a moment before asking calmly, "I just heard that after your daughter woke up, she kept saying that she had encountered a devil that ate people." "Yes, she said that the devil had no skin and was covered in blood. She made it sound so scary." Thinking of what Du Ling'er had said last night, she still felt a chill down her spine. "BDNVL.M. Madame Lu, can you do me a favor and help examine Ling'er?" As Du Wangshi spoke, she seemed to have thought of something and took off a silver bracelet from her wrist. She stood up and walked a few steps to Lin Suisui before stuffing it into her hand. "I know that this bit of consultation fee might not be enough, but this is all I have now. Go over and take a look first. In the future, when I have money in the future, I will definitely compensate you, okay?" Chapter 67. The Truth. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 67. The Truth. Translator. Henyi Translations Editor. Henyi Translations, then I'll follow you over and take a look first. Lin Suisui didn't refuse the consultation fee from Du Wangshe and simply accepted it. She gave Mrs. Luo some instructions, then followed Du Wangshe towards the Du family's tent. Du Ling'er was very unstable. In order to prevent her from losing control and hurting others again, the Du family had no choice but to gag her and restrain her in the tent. However, it was probably because of this treatment that Du Ling'er looked even more like a little beast that had been forced into a corner. At this moment, all that could be seen on her dirty face was her crazy eyes that looked hysterical, sharp, and fierce. Mother, when Du Ling'er went crazy previously, the Du family had more or less received her unfriendly greeting, so even though Du Ling'er was already restrained by the rope, Du Miao'er and the others still didn't dare to take the initiative to approach. They only stayed outside the tent and looked at the situation inside. Seeing Du Wangshe bring Lin Suisui over, the sisters guarding the door were clearly surprised and even in disbelief. Even though Du Miao'er, who was standing in front, hid it very quickly, Lin Suisui still saw a flash of panic and guilt on her face. Why? Are you unwilling to let me invite Madame Lu to treat Ling'er? Madame Du was naturally polite to Lin Suisui because she needed her help. However, she wasn't so polite to these two stepdaughters, who were blocking the door. Moreover, she was now suspecting that Ling'er was set up by these two girls. After she deal with Ling'er's matter, she would deal with these two bitches. Mother, we didn't mean that. We're just worried about Ling'er, so, Du Waner, who was beside Du Miao'er, quickly stood up to explain, but after Du Wangshe glanced at her, Du Waner retreated behind Du Miao'er. She didn't dare to say anything else. Lin Suisui ignored the Du family's skirmish. She walked around Du Wangshe and the others and slowly walked into the tent. She squatted down and grabbed Du Ling'er's struggling arm. Unfortunately, her wrist was tied behind her back. It was useless for her to struggle. In just a short exchange, she was pinned to the blanket by Lin Suisui. Even if she tried her best to shake her head and kick her feet, she couldn't stop Lin Suisui from taking her pulse. She's suffering from shock. After Lin Suisui finished her diagnosis, she stood up and turned to look at Du Wangshe as she calmly told her the diagnosis. She needs acupuncture and medicine. The conditions are limited now. Moreover, her body was injured to begin with. It's not a good idea to tie her up like this. How about this? I'll come over every 3 days to give her acupuncture. The rest of the time, I'll prescribe her a calming medicine with the herbs we can find now. Just give them to her 3 times a day to stabilize her condition first. This wasn't the first time she had seen this condition. However, illnesses always came and went. Moreover, it was a mental problem that surfaced after being traumatized. If she wanted to completely recover, it would take more than a day or 2. Moreover, with the current conditions, there was no way to find all the herbs. The only thing they could do was to try their best to stabilize her condition and not let it worsen. Also, it's best not to give her any more stimulation during this period of time. Try to let her recuperate. After thinking for a moment, Lin Suisui added meaningfully, besides, it's best not to mention what she experienced previously. Otherwise, I can't guarantee how long she can last. After saying this, Lin Suisui turned around. She ignored Du Wangshe's expression of gratitude and turned to walk out of the tent. However, before she could take 2 steps, she stopped beside Du Miao'er. She turned around and smiled at her as she asked with concern, "What's wrong with your neck, Miss Miao'er?" "I fell yesterday and lacerated my skin." Lin Miao'er took a step back and carefully avoided eye contact with Lin Suisui as she explained in a low voice, "It's fine." "How can it be fine? I know some ways to remove scars. Let me take a look for you." As Lin Suisui spoke, she reached out to look at the wound on Du Miao'er's neck. Unexpectedly, Du Miao'er quickly took a few steps back to avoid Lin Suisui's outstretched hand, as if she was avoiding a terrifying beast. "I'm fine. I won't trouble you." Seeing Du Miao'er's rejection, Lin Suisui didn't force her. She just looked at her and smiled politely. Then, if you need anything, you can look for me. After saying that, Lin Suisui turned around and left without looking back. She didn't walk back quickly. Before long, she heard hurried footsteps behind her. She didn't look back, but continued walking. She didn't stop until she reached a place without people. Then, she turned her head to the side and said, "Stop hiding. I can see you. Madame Lu." Du Wanner carefully stuck her head out from behind the tree. She paused for a moment before walking out from behind the tree. She glanced at Lin Suisui uneasily, then hurriedly lowered her head again and said, "My sister and I really didn't do it." Du Wanner pursed her lips. Seeing that Lin Suisui didn't respond, she took 2 more steps forward anxiously and explained to Lin Suisui with red eyes, "Really? I admit that we did ask Sanyang for help yesterday to delay you for a while, but our goal wasn't to look for Gu Erlang in your ox cart. Instead, we saw Gu Erlang go to the stream. At that time, we had agreed to go to the nearby pasture to look for wild vegetables, but Du Linger wanted to go out with us not to look for wild vegetables, but to see her lover. Therefore, we split up when we came out. I accompanied my sister to the stream to look for Gu Erlang. However, not long after we left the camp, we heard people shouting from the camp behind us that something had happened. We didn't intend to interfere, but halfway there, we saw Gu Erlang walking back from the stream in a hurry. My sister and I wanted to stop him, but we couldn't catch up. Later on, we realized that Du Linger was the one in trouble. We swear that we really weren't the ones who schemed against Du Linger this time. Her mother protects her so fiercely. We hate her, but we really don't have the guts to attack her." Chapter 68. Questioning. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 68. Questioning Translator. Henyi Translations Editor. Henyi Translations, you said that Du Linger has a lover. Lin Suisui looked at Du Wanner, but wasn't too interested in what she had just said. If Du Linger really wasn't with Du Miaoer and her sister when it happened yesterday and went to see her lover, then it was very likely that she had seen the girl's murder with her own eyes. Unfortunately, Du Linger had gone crazy from fear. Otherwise, she would be able to get some information from her. However, from the looks of it, there was another way. As long as they followed the traces of Du Linger's whereabouts yesterday, they could more or less reduce the range of their search. Yes, it's Ma Shun from the Ma family. Du Wanner only hesitated for a moment before telling Lin Suisui the truth. After she and her sister returned yesterday and found out that something had happened to Du Linger, they were almost scared out of their wits. Yes, they indeed hated the Du family and wanted revenge. But no matter how much they wanted revenge, they wouldn't choose to get revenge now. The future of the 2 sisters was still in the hands of Du Wangshe. If they were completely confident, it would be a different story. However, Du Miaoer still wanted to marry Gu Erlang. At this time, they needed the Du family's help. How could they offend her precious daughter Du Linger? They weren't that brazen. They had explained it to Du Wangshe yesterday, but she didn't seem to believe them at all. However, because of Du Linger's matter at that time, she didn't have the time to teach them a lesson. But today, "Madame Lu, we won't dare to be so bold in the future. Please be magnanimous and forgive us." Du Wanner came because Du Miaoer had given her a look telling her to come. Actually, they were confident that they could persuade Du Wangshe. As long as no one else guided her, even if they would suffer in the next few days, they were still confident that they could push the blame away. But now, if Madame Lu were to give some pointers to the Du family, then... Originally, they weren't worried. After all, Du Wangshe had always bullied the weak and feared the strong. After yesterday's incident, Du Wangshe probably didn't have the courage to cause trouble for Madame Lu. However, they didn't expect Du Wangshe to actually put down her pride to look for Madame Lu to treat Du Linger. What surprised them even more was that Madame Lu actually agreed. Du Miaoer and her sister didn't think that Lin Suisui was doing so because she was magnanimous and kind. They only thought that she was taking the opportunity to take revenge on them. That was why Du Miaoer asked Du Waner to come over and apologize to Lin Suisui. They wanted her to let them off. What's with the wound on your sister's neck? Lin Suisui didn't immediately agree to Du Waner's request. She asked another question. When we rushed back from outside yesterday, my sister fell and was scratched by the bushes by the road. Although Du Waner didn't know why Lin Suisui suddenly cared about this, she quickly answered her question. Do you remember where your sister fell? Lin Suisui was clearly more concerned about this than Du Waner had expected. She looked like she wouldn't stop until she got to the bottom of it. I remember. I'll take you there. Du Waner needed help now. No matter how puzzled she was, she wouldn't refuse now. She quickly nodded and raised her hand to point in a direction for Lin Suisui. It's over there. It's not far from here. Lin Suisui nodded and didn't refuse Du Waner's suggestion. Seeing that Lin Suisui really wanted to go, Du Waner naturally didn't delay and quickly led Lin Suisui to the place where her sister, Du Miaoer, had fallen yesterday. Just as Du Waner had described to Lin Suisui, there was indeed a patch of overgrown bushes. Even though the thorny vines had shed their green leaves, the black hard thorns growing on the branches were still quite prickly. Lin Suisui squatted down and carefully pulled at the thorny vine in front of her to take a look. Only when she keenly found dried blood on one of the thorns did she let go of the thorny vine in her hand. She stood up and turned to look at Du Waner with a kind smile. The wound on your sister's neck was caused by the thorns of this vine. The juice of this thorny vine was poisonous. Although it wasn't lethal, if one was cut by this thorny vine, the wound was very likely to leave a scar after it healed. I made some scar removal ointment previously. If you don't want a scar on your sister's neck, come with me to get some. With that, Lin Suisui turned around and walked back without saying anything else to Du Waner. Although Du Waner was also worried about the scar on her sister's neck, she was more concerned about whether Lin Suisui would agree to their request. She jogged to keep up with Lin Suisui. After hesitating for a long time, she chased after her and begged, Madame Lu, we were too reckless and did those things without regard for your reputation. But we had no choice. As you can see, our stepmother does not care about our lives at all. She only wants to sell us out for money. She decided to marry my sister to that widower who slaughtered pigs. Do you know that the widower is only 3 years younger than my father? He already had 2 wives. I heard that he beat them to death. Originally, he should have had a child. His second wife was pregnant at that time, but was beaten up by him before she gave birth. In the end, 2 people died. If my sister marries him, her life will be over. We really couldn't think of any other way. That's why we targeted Mr. Gu. We won't dare to do it again. Madame Lu, please spare us this time. You keep saying that you two were forced into a corner, so you two had no choice but to force me into a dead end. Lin Suisui stopped and turned to look at Du Waner, who was crying. Her smile was filled with ridicule. If you two were forced into a corner, you have the right to destroy my family and snatch my husband. I have no enmity with you two, yet you two made such a despicable decision. What right do you have to beg me to forgive you and show mercy? Chapter 69. Predicament. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 69. Predicament. Translator. Henyi Translations Editor. Henyi Translations, but nothing has happened yet, right? A trace of embarrassment flashed across Du Waner's face, but she quickly recovered. She bit her lip and argued in a low voice, you can forgive my stepmother and help her treat Du Linger, so why can't you show mercy to me and my sister? If my stepmother hadn't forced us into a corner, how could we have done such a thing? Miss Du, I think you've misunderstood. I went to treat Du Linger because your stepmother, Du Wangshe, gave me a consultation fee. In this world, there are only two ways to ask for help. One is love, and the other is personal benefit. We definitely don't have any sort of good relationship at all, so what can you offer me to let you sisters off? Lin Suisui wasn't angry at Du Wanner's retort. Instead, she stared at Du Wanner as if she was a fool as she responded. They weren't familiar with each other to begin with, and even had some hostility towards each other. Naturally, there was no need to be so polite to her. Du Wanner blushed from shame, but when she saw the silver bracelet that Lin Suisui took out to show her, she had to admit that Lin Suisui was right. Therefore, in the end, she covered her face and ran away crying. She didn't even bother to take the scar gel that Lin Suisui had mentioned previously. Lin Suisui didn't think much of this. When she returned to the ox cart, Lu Zhe was walking with a windshield curtain. He had just returned. Seeing that she was safe, Lu Zhe was obviously relieved. However, there was still some disapproval in his eyes as he walked over. "Why did you go over there alone?" "I just went to take a look at Du Linger's condition." "It's fine." Lin Suisui took a few steps forward and comforted Lu Zhe with a smile. "I have a sense of propriety. I won't alert the enemy. After all, if I go over as a woman, even if something goes wrong, it won't arouse the other party's suspicion. On the other hand, if you accompany me, it will make the other party wary." Lu Zhe protected Lin Suisui all the way back to the bonfire. Then, he sat down and continued to ask her, "Did you gain anything from this trip?" Lin Suisui nodded and didn't hide anything. She told Lu Zhe everything she had seen and heard when she had just gone to the Du family. Then, she said, "I checked the wound on Du Miaoer's neck and didn't see anything fishy about it. Later on, I asked Du Wanner to bring me to the place where Du Miaoer fell and indeed found relevant traces there. Therefore, from the looks of it, these two sisters should still be themselves. However, Du Wanner said that Du Linger has a lover. She came out with them this time because she wanted to meet her lover. Therefore, this should be a clue we can use now. Although it wasn't very useful, it was better than finding a needle in a haystack. We don't have to be so anxious about this matter." Lu Zhe scooped a bowl of soup for Lin Suisui and said slowly, "Since that wolf guard chose to disguise himself and enter the refugee camp, it means that he has a motive. The woman who had died was the wolf guard's tool to infiltrate the refugee camp. The wolf guard had replaced the woman, so the population of the refugee camp is still equal for the time being. For the time being, there's nothing obviously suspicious. However, you also said that without the support of the secret medicine, the human skin wouldn't be able to last for long. Therefore, in order to continue hiding in the refugee camp, the wolf guard would definitely find the next target. This way, there would definitely be people missing. The number of refugees in the refugee camp is fixed. If people go missing, it will naturally cause alarm and chaos. At that time, it will probably be impossible for that wolf guard to continue hiding." Lin Suisui nodded. Lu Zhe's thoughts coincided with hers. The two of them discussed for a while before Lu Zhe got up and went to look for Pei Qian. This matter needed to be dealt with by Pei Qian. With the northern barbarians' wolf guard spies infiltrating the refugee camp, it would be very difficult for the two of them to deal with this trouble alone. However, if Pei Qian handled it, it would be much easier. Lin Suisui didn't join them. She tidied up briefly and when she saw that it was getting late, she wanted to rest in the carriage. Seeing that it was getting colder every day, Lin Suisui became worried about the future. According to what Lu Zhe had told her previously, it would take at least a month and a half to reach their destination. It was already the middle of October. It was said that snow would already begin to fall in the north at the end of October, and it would be snowing even more heavily in the winter months. At that time, how would the refugees survive the cold? Lin Suisui hugged Little White and huddled in a corner of the carriage while thinking about the current situation and the trouble she needed to deal with next. She didn't even notice when Lu Zhe returned. "What are you thinking about?" Lu Zhe asked worriedly when he saw Lin Suisui frowning with a worried look. Nothing. I just think that the weather is getting colder every day, so it'll probably start snowing in a few days. At that time, having enough food and clothes will probably become difficult again. Lin Suisui sighed. Her sleeves were under Little White's warm stomach. Although she didn't have to worry about food for the time being, she still had to be on guard towards potential danger. She and Lu Zhe were refugees now, so they would definitely be safer if the entire refugee camp was safe. If anything happened to the refugee camp, their lives would seem as worthless as blades of grass in the eyes of the higher-ups. Pei Qian has already thought of what you're worried about. That's why he arranged for us to stop and rest for a few days. He asked me to stay behind in order to discuss bringing people into the mountain to hunt. Lu Zhe whispered to Lin Suisui about what he had just discussed in Pei Qian's tent. His main goal was to reassure her. Even if we go into the mountains to hunt, how much prey can we catch? There are thousands of mouths to feed in the refugee camp. Lin Suisui admitted that hunting was indeed a way to resolve the current crisis, but it was too inadequate. From what Pei Qian said, the imperial court has sent people to send food over. It should arrive in the next 2 days. Lu Zhe stuffed the hand stove filled with charcoal into the blanket where Lin Suisui was hiding. He reached out and habitually rubbed the top of her head as he said slowly, "Don't worry about it. Let nature take its course. Hurry up and sleep." Chapter 70. Mr. Pei, who came from afar. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 70. Mr. Pei, who came from afar. Translator. Henyi Translations Editor. Henyi Translations. There were actually many people in the refugee camp who knew how to hunt. After Pei Qian instructed someone to explain the predicament they would face next, many people packed up and entered the mountain without any hesitation. As for those who didn't have any hunting skills, Pei Qian didn't really ignore them. Those who were unwilling to stay in the camp without contributing could also follow the experienced sergeants into the mountains and listen to their arrangements to hunt together. Although the gains might not be that much, it was at least better than doing nothing. With such an arrangement, there were basically no complaints in the refugee camp. After all, the memory of the days when they didn't have enough to eat was too fresh. Now that the men had entered the mountain, the women began to think of ways to search for edible wild vegetables and fruits. There were also bold women who went to the stream through the valley to see if they could catch live fish here. The entire refugee camp was peaceful and harmonious. Lin Suisui was sitting under a yellow poplar tree beside the ox cart. She had sewn the rabbit skin she had accumulated previously into a whole piece with needles and thread. It was the best way to keep warm. If there were more, she wanted to make a small vest. When the sound of hooves sounded on the dirt road outside the camp, she was the first to look up. A group of cavalry came into view. The leader was dressed in black and looked familiar. Although it only flashed past her vision quickly, Lin Suisui didn't miss the murderous look in his eyes. After about 10 minutes, Lin Suisui saw an ox cart surrounded by soldiers on horses. The ox cart wasn't moving fast, because the carriage covered by the tarpaulin above was full. If she wasn't wrong, this should be the food that Lu Zhe had mentioned to her when he returned yesterday. The imperial court had sent reinforcements to give them, the refugees, food. Looking at the dozen ox carts piled with food, Lin Suisui heaved a sigh of relief. With this food and the mountain prey they had hunted in the past few days, at least no matter how difficult it was for them during the next period, they wouldn't encounter the tragic situation they did in the sandstorm. With her worries relieved, Lin Suisui worked faster. Unlike Lin Suisui, Pei Qian had an unpleasant expression ever since Du Yuanyi arrived. He only knew that the imperial court would arrange for people to escort rations over, but he didn't expect the person to be Du Yuanyi. He was the heir of the duke's estate, and Du Yuanruo's older brother. I didn't expect you to be the one to come over. Pei Qian didn't hide his unhappiness after seeing Du Yuanyi. He sneered coldly as he ordered him to leave. All right, the things have been delivered. We're traveling north, so the road ahead won't be easy. There's no need for you to continue sending us off. By the way, when you return, bring your brother along. He suffered from the plague previously and hasn't recovered yet. If he continues traveling to the north with me, since it's so dangerous there, the risk is too great. Thank you for your concern, Mr. Pei. Du Yuanyi sat opposite Pei Qian. He looked over with a smile and said coldly, my useless brother has already troubled you a lot along the way. Therefore, my family instructed me to send the rations over this time because they wanted me to make up for my brother's mistakes. At the same time, I can also supervise my brother so that he can at least complete this mission. How can he return halfway without completing this mission? This wasn't the first time Du Yuanyi and Pei Qian had worked together, so they were naturally used to such confrontations. After saying this, he didn't want to stay any longer. He stood up and cupped his hands politely at Pei Qian. Then, he turned around and left without looking back. Pei Qian stared at Du Yuanyi's back as he left. The anxiety and frustration on his face had long disappeared and the initial calmness had returned. Qian He, Gu Erlang also entered the mountains today. He sat behind the long table for a moment before looking up to call Qian He, who was standing at the door. Qian He bowed, then replied respectfully and quickly, yes, he entered the mountain early in the morning. However, Madame Lu didn't follow him this time. She didn't go out with the other women to look for wild vegetables either. She stayed by the ox cart to sew the rabbit skin they had accumulated along the way. I heard that she's planning to make a blanket. If there's any left, she can also make a vest. Pei Qian raised his eyebrows and laughed heartily. Didn't you have a few good quality skins previously? Send them to her now. That fox skin wasn't bad. Although the color of its fur was mixed, it was good for making a scarf or sleeve. Go yourself. Tell Madame Lu that the pheasant soup she brewed last time wasn't bad. Although Qian He was also puzzled by Mr. Pei's attitude towards the country girl doctor, he knew his limits and didn't ask directly. He turned around to leave. After Du Yuanyi left Pei Qian's tent, he rushed towards Du Yuanruo's tent. Ever since he had been threatened by Pei Qian a few times in a row, Du Yuanruo had been extremely obedient during this period of time. It was very cold outside at this moment, so he simply stayed in the tent and drank wine and ate meat. Although the environment was tough, he actually gained weight. When he heard that Du Yuanyi had personally sent the ration over, Du Yuanruo had a bad feeling. At this moment, he was panicking, like a rat that had been discovered stealing, and he wanted to escape from the tent. However, just as he lifted the curtain, he bumped into Du Yuanyi. Du Yuanruo subconsciously cried out in surprise. In the next moment, he was sent flying back to the tent by Du Yuanyi. His cry turned into a scream as he knocked over the tables and chairs in the tent and fell to the ground. Trash! Du Yuanyi walked in front of Du Yuanruo and glanced at Du Yuanruo, who was shouting in pain on the ground, with disdain and dissatisfaction. He couldn't understand how he had such a younger brother. Look at all the trouble you caused. Even if Pei Qian is the reincarnation of the devil, you can't possibly have no way to deal with him, right? Where's your usual wittiness? Did it all go to waste?